Hey everyone, and welcome back to my Spitfire build video. So what we are going to do today is I'm just going to do a little bit of painting. I should have recorded what I've done already. Unfortunately, I'm just a little bit new to the fact that I've managed to pick up a editing software that allows me to splice videos together. And this has, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to remember the fact that I need to do that. So I've mostly done the cockpit interior. I'm just going to use a little bit of Games Workshop's Abaddon Black to finish off the reservoir tanks here. I don't know if they're part of the hydraulic system or whether they're the oxygen or what, but these have taken 2 coats of black paint to get the right consistency. Other parts I've just picked out in a silver. I have given the sidewalls a wash of Nuln oil. I do extensively paint a lot of wargaming miniatures, so a lot of my paints will be from the Citadel colour range. But this is the pilot figure. Don't know if that will focus. He's just been given an undercoat of Death Guard green, and I'm now going to give him a base coat of the flat earth that came with the kit. Although it's not called out in the instructions, it does look like he's got a life preserver on, and so I will paint that with a suitable yellow colour. So the flying hat and goggles are also called out to be picked out in this flat earth colour, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to paint them a desert yellow colour and then wash it with a Agrax Earthshade from Citadel Miniatures, basically in the hopes that it will perhaps give it a more leathery look. The flying coveralls are more of a khaki coverall that he's wearing, so I'm happy with the brown shade that he'll be painted with. I did start painting the prop last night as well, and again this was given a very light base coat of Death Guard green. It was just sprayed because I had a few items that I wanted to spray. Moving on to the cockpit assembly, what I have done, if I use this little stick, is the instructions call for the joystick to be green on the lower portion and black on the joystick's control handle. The gun sight is black. The seat is, they say they call out one of the padding in green. Having looked at some real life cockpit photos, I decided that I would spray this again, the Death Guard green, and then paint the cockpit tub the flat earth colour, and do the cushioning at the back of the seat and the headrest just above here, above the seat, in a dark grey. I'm now going to give that a wash of Nuln Oil. Actually, no, I'm not. I need to just give a little bit of paint on a small part of this, which is just here, and then once that's dry, I will give this all a wash of Nuln Oil, just so as it's got a little bit of shading in the recesses and it gives a little bit of depth. Okay. So, clean out the brush. So whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I'll just, I'm going to just point out that when I do the cockpit, it's got the transfer sheet for the cockpit instruments, which I will slide on. I will need, once I've given this a wash of Nuln Oil, I will just paint that with a gloss varnish, just to allow the transfer sheet to slide on easier. So, join me in a mo. So I'm just going to come back in on the figure with some Avalanche Sunset, which is a kind of like a mustardy yellow. It's not a bright yellow, but it should give enough contrast. I'm just going to paint his life preserver with the yellow. Once I've done this, I'm going to give his face a quick blast with Rakarth Flesh. And then once that's dry, I will give it a wash of Rakarth Flesh shade, just to shade it a little. And then, as I said, the helmet will be done in a desert yellow, Xandri dust to be precise. Just basically so that there's a little bit of contrast. I'll pick the flying gloves out in a dark grey as well. So, and for the dark grey, I'll use a rust grey for that. The painting of the pilot figure is so much easier prior to installation, and actually I might change my mind on the grey. What I might do is, depending on how it looks, I might go back over it with the Zandri dust to try and point out that they're more of a tan leather rather than a cloth material. So there are some flying goggles on here which I will try and pick out with some silver when the washes and everything are done. So I'm just going to go back over with the Avalanche Sunset on the life jacket just to give it a good base coat. Good solid base coat, and then hopefully when we give it a wash the creases and folds will add some depth. Okay. Right, so we'll just pop that aside, let it dry thoroughly before applying the wash. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for paint to dry, I'm going to glue the wings together, and I'm going to do this before gluing the wing, the underside of the aircraft and the wing to the fuselage, simply because it's going to make it easier for me to be able to glue and clamp these particular parts. So got these little clamps here. These clamps came as a pack of 6. They only cost £1 in the pound shop here in the UK, so they're quite handy to have as tools. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this, so what I will point out is that where it called out for this to be sprayed in the instructions, I've sprayed it, but then I've scraped away some of the paint on the areas that need gluing so that I get a better bond, and I've done that on all the pieces that I pre-sprayed. This is basically so that I can get a good bond without any issues. And the reason I'm doing this part first is so that I can pop the glue on there and then marry up. Now that should hold at the back whilst I go along the front edge, and I need to really try and get the front edge done as neatly as possible, because this is what is going to be seen. So you can see the ports there for the wing mounted machine guns. I think in the early versions they were 0.303. So right, that's one done. And then if I need to do any light sanding on the seam line for that, I will do. What I will point out as well is I removed the locating lugs. So the locating lugs on the wing, there's only like 2 and they're there. And I removed those just to make it easier to glue them together. I've just noticed that there's a slight imperfection there on the inside of the wing, which I'll just smooth down. Okay, so again, on the inside here, I'm going to do that and then marry it up. And then from there okay, so let's just pop these on to help hold it in place whilst the glue cures. And that's the wing done. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is glue the cockpit into the fuselage. Now the cockpit aligns on this particular spar within the cockpit framework and up these 2 sections, and there's actually, if you look, there's actually 2 little locating slots on the thing. I've just scraped off a little bit of paint on each side just below those lines so that I can, when I've placed it, I can add some glue. So let's, and oh, there it is. Okay, so making sure that you locate it correctly. Into the fuselage, that it lines up in the right places, like so. And then what I'm going to do is just add some glue in these spots. And then that's that. So now I'm going to glue the fuselage halves together. And again, as I said earlier, I have scraped away along where the join's going to be. So making sure that I line up Okay. Right. So now that the wings had some time to dry, I'm going to use the pegs. I should do this part of the fuselage first. Now this seems to have slightly more of a ridge than the top side, but hopefully and then I'm going to just do the other side. So what I will do is, using one of my clips, I shall just anchor it in place. Not getting the best. Okay, so that's a little bit difficult because I need to make sure that this joins, but I'm not getting the best anchorage on this. Right, hopefully that will stay it. So coming in from here, and then so I shall clip there on the tail, and then once that's cured and gone off a little bit, I will do the underside. So that's that for now. Okay, so I've joined the two fuselage halves together and sanded where the seam line was. I'm hoping that the undercoat that I use will hide any small imperfections. If not, I can go back over with it. So joining the wing on, it's a little bit of a tight squeeze on this side. So okay, and that's it, that's in. Right then, that's quite a large gap, front and rear of that, but hopefully we can sort something out. So let me just, I'm going to start with this side. Just pop that in. I'll do the wing roots. And then the rear. And hopefully that should align. Okay, so let's get a clip. Pop that on. Okay, so we'll leave that to glue, to dry, even to glue. I've just glued it. Right, thank you. Okay, so what I've done is I have finished gluing in some smaller details. I've added in the landing legs, the undercarriage legs, and the rear tail wheel, the pitot tube on the underside of the wing. And what I've done is masked off areas I didn't want touched, and then given it a spray coat. Now the upper surface is again sprayed with the Death Guard green from Games Workshop, but the undersurface I used white spray from Army Painter, and that's so that the pale green colour that goes on the underside will take reasonably well, and then obviously the green and brown camouflage scheme on the upper surfaces for the Death Guard green. And that's that. I'm going to leave this now for a good few hours just for the paint to cure a bit longer, and come back and join me when I start painting. Okay, so I've been adding some paint to the upper surfaces, and I'm using the dark earth and the dark green that was provided with the kit. Now the dark earth was absolutely fine, but the dark green was in a poor state. It had thickened quite a bit. Fortunately, I've been able to thin it down so that it's usable. And I've just basically mapped out the camouflage pattern. I've done one coat. I'm just in the process of doing the second coat, and using the green paint thinned down quite a bit so that it goes on hopefully smoothly. I'm using the starter brush which came with the set, and it's not too bad as a brush goes. It's okay. I mean, obviously I don't expect great things from it, but it's been okay. So I'll continue. I have put a very thin coat of the pale green underside on, and again this paint itself was extremely thick. It's obviously the length of time it's been in the pot has degraded it a bit, but again, thinning it down, I've been able to do a quick single coat with it. So I'll continue. Okay, so I've progressed a little bit further, and I have done a pin wash in the recessed panel lines and all I've done is I've used Citadel Nuln oil for this, and basically that's it. So I'm at a stage now where I will use Citadel's technical hard coat, which is a gloss varnish. I'll thin it right down and I'll do a couple of thin coats over the entire model in preparation for the decals going on. So basically with the pin wash, all I did was using a fine pointed brush, and I was using an Army Painter detail brush, if I can find it. As soon as I've just put it back in the pot, I should be able to find it. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Oh no, tell a lie, it was just at the side. So this Army Painter fine detail brush is what I was using. Just basically a little bit on the brush and then just touching it to the recessed panel lines to let the fluid flow through and darken them up. I've also used it to dirty up the underside, and I will also use some dry brushing after I've done the glossing to add some other weathering. The silver parts here on the exhausts have been given a base coat of lead belcher, and then they've had a couple of coats of Nuln oil over the top to dull it down and provide some shading in places. And that's where I am at the moment. So as I say, I shall do the gloss varnish over the top to protect the model, and to also prep the surfaces ready for the decal application. And what I'll probably do is I'll do the top side, let it dry, and then I shall paint the underside, just basically so that I can handle the model in two phases, allowing one side to dry completely before moving on to the next one. So I'll get that done. Okay, so my varnish that I put on the hard coat has had quite a few days to go off, actually, because I've been waiting for some microset and microsol to arrive. So I'm going to pop the decals on. I'm going to give this a good soak. And because I'm using all of them at once, I'm happy for it to all go into the dish at the same time. What I am going to do though is take it out. Now, things to point out on the box artwork with regards to decal placement. We're quite fortunate with the panel lines on the Spitfire, so that things like this serial number, the Papa 9495 serial number, goes pretty much towards the tailplane, and there is a vertical, an angled vertical panel line and a horizontal panel line that you can align the corners up to on that, which is quite good. You should also note that the I'm assuming these are the call sign markings. So Delta Whiskey Kilo would be that particular aircraft's call sign. Do not mirror, so they do not align. So this one on the right hand side of the aircraft starts here at the tailplane, but this one on the left hand side starts past the serial number for the aircraft. So be aware of those. Okay, so I've been doing the decals here for a short while. I've had some problems using the microsol and microset on the large transfers that go on the side of the spit. basically I was one of the first one I put on, I had some issues moving it into place. And unfortunately the microset softened it up too much, so in the end I had to abandon it. The second one on the left hand side, I decided not to use any microset on and left it so that I could move it with just some water out of the saucer that I used. And I'm now just popping these roundels on. Once they're on, I'm using the micro set to soften them up so that they adhere and conform better. So leave that, and I think the next part will be, once these are dry, I'll go over them with some more varnish to seal them in. Okay, so now that the decals have dried out, I've just gone over them with a pin wash where necessary, and I'm just going to use this Army Painter Anti-Shine matte varnish to protect the paintwork so far, and seal the decals in. I'll do the underside first, let it dry, and then flip it over and do the top side. Okay. I've got to a point now where I am looking at just finishing off the kit. What I have done is I've used some super glue to put the propeller on and the antenna mast. I've put the undercarriage wheels on and the tail wheel. The cockpit canopy at the moment is not glued in, so that I can just go over a couple of pieces with some dark green to finish off, and I need to do some dark green on the antenna mount. For the antenna, it's the old trick of you could use some cotton string, cotton thread. However, I am, for the first time, going to try using some stretched sprue for it. So what we look at is just allowing the sprue to melt to a point where it's pliable, and then pull it apart, and it causes it to string basically. I have used this technique previously for antennas on 1/35th scale AFVs, but this will be the first time I've used it on an aircraft. And then just hold it in place whilst it dries, or whilst it cools I should say, and all being well, I should have enough string there to be able to put between the antenna mount and the so looking at that, I am I'm looking at about 5 centimetres there. So what I'm going to do is cut to length. Now what I'm going to do is, using some super glue, and I'm using Jarl, who subscribes to the channel, suggested some Gorilla super glue gel, which I have used a couple of times, and I actually do find it quite good. So thanks for that, Jarl. And then using a needle, I shall put a drop on there. And a drop on there. Move that away so that I don't. And then hopefully you can see that the antenna wire is in place. Take just a tiny bit off that. Right, let's try again. Okay. So I've popped on the antenna. So the aircraft, I've gone as far as I want to take it, I think. It's finished up. I've done weathering and the panel lining, and the transfers are on. The underside is probably a little bit more weathered than the top side. A couple of things I've done that I wouldn't normally have done previously on model builds. This is my first aircraft build for some time, since I was a kid really. I do a lot of AFV and wargaming model making. Oops. And this is, as I say, the first aircraft I've done since I was much younger. Couple of things that I've done that I've never done before. One of them is putting an antenna wire on the aircraft. I don't know if it'll pick that up, but I've never bothered before in the past, but I'm glad I did this one, as it does set it off just nice. The other one was masking off the cockpit to be able to then spray the framework. It kind of worked. I did have to go over it by hand just to give it a more solid looking appearance. Something I didn't like, and that was putting the decals on. So for the first time ever, I'd used Microsol and Microset, and it was a bugger to work with. I managed to place this decal on in the right position, but then managed to nudge it out of position and couldn't get it back. The more I tried, the more it started to break up, so I ended up having to leave it in that position, which isn't correct. In future, what I'll do is, instead of using the whole, because this is one piece, what I will probably do is cut it down and put the pieces on individually so that I don't have that problem again. Other than that, I'm pleased with how it's gone. I will look to find a little display case, Perspex display case that I can pop it into to keep it free from dust and display it somewhere nice. The aircraft itself, Delta Whiskey Kilo, I did a little bit of digging, and it seems that this particular aircraft, as it says on the box art, took part in 610 Squadron, which was eventually based at Biggin Hill. And this particular aircraft, there's a couple of suggestions that the serial numbers, the serial codes that are on the aircraft get transferred to different aircraft if it's lost or damaged. And I found one report that said the pilot of this aircraft was killed in a dogfight in May 1940, which would be prior to the Battle of Britain. And then another report that said that this aircraft was damaged and the pilot wounded in August 1940 by a Messerschmitt 110. So it would appear that it's had more than one guise. This particular serial number has had more than one guise. Anyway, as I say, that's as far as I want to take it. I'm going to leave it as it is. Thank you for joining me on this. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and it would be nice if you could leave me a like. And hopefully you'll join me on the next one. All right, take care. Bye.